if you believe in any kind of God whatsoever, there can be kind of a common consensus that that God has consciousness. It's a conscious being. I started writing in my journal recently without knowing what I was going to write, just because writing is kind of fun by hand, especially now with typing. It's just kind of fun just to write something out and look back and see your own chicken scratch. Yeah, God has consciousness, and I think everyone who is religious or semi-religious or thinks about things that are beyond this plane of existence will agree on probably that. I'm sure it's not entirely true, but you get what I'm saying. But what a lot of folks won't agree with is that I think that God is consciousness without form. So we are consciousness with form, right? We have brains and we have bodies that those brains go into, and then we have cities and communities and solar systems and galaxies that all make up our form, and those things are in a way restricting of consciousness. There's only so much knowledge we can have, there's only so much thinking we can do before we die of dehydration. There's only so many of those things that we can do. But God is consciousness without the need for a brain. A gigantic consciousness without form, without boundary. So I was thinking of if consciousness can increase with time in finite beings like us, in small compressed beings like us. And so I looked up the definition of consciousness just to kind of start somewhere. And I don't have it in front of me right now, but you can look it up yourself. Consciousness is something like the ability to think of your own thoughts, or the ability to be aware of yourself. Awareness is a big part of it as well. And with those definitions, those things definitely can and do increase with time. When you think about babies and their dependence on others and their inability to understand things like object permanence, they don't really have a fully fledged, a fully blossomed consciousness. And that's just my opinion. I'm not basing that in fact or anything. You can definitely do your own research on that. But, think about memories, for example. No one remembers, their first birthday for the most part, usually. Usually memories grow and grow and build as time goes on. Then they wane, and they become less frequent as the end of life approaches, assuming that you're dying of natural causes at a ripe old age. And consciousness does build, but what is it that increases consciousness, and how can any of us who are interested increase our own consciousness so that when we pass, we're more conscious? Is that the appropriate way to say it? More conscious? Well, I wrote in the margins of my journal that every being, every living creature, has the exact same amount of life, and that's one. No matter at what point your life ends, you have one life that you've lived. So, what can we do during our lives to increase consciousness? And I don't know the answer to that, but this is where I'm going to start rambling because I'm driving in a car and I'm kind of bored and I don't know who this video is even for. So, the increasing of consciousness, you'd kind of have to look at those who we would say are more conscious, right? Who have more consciousness. And you'll look at the Jesuses and the Buddhas and the Gandhis and the Martin Luther Kings as people that have an idea of greater justice, and that there's more to this world than our corporeal, kind of like I, me, mine, mammal way of thinking about things. Those people may have more consciousness. So is it living in a world or living in your own personal mind of compassion and empathy that increases consciousness? Maybe. I have no idea. Maybe every single life is equally conscious at the end. Who knows? Who knows about that for sure? But I would say that humans are the most conscious of all of creation that we know of course. I'm sure there's some alien out there that is super hyper-conscious, who knows. But, it can be argued that we're more conscious than, say, an ant or a bird or a kangaroo or a deer or anything like that, because we have thoughts about our thoughts and we think of I differently. And we can project in the future and we recess back into the past and live in those times and think about them. So we're the most conscious of things. So the goal there is to look at these creatures with less consciousness and the ones that have debatably more consciousness and say, how do you become more like the other and less like, the previous one? Well, I guess the smarter way to say that would be more like the latter and less like the former. Well, what do animals do? I'm going to lump every single creature that isn't us, that isn't human, into the phrase animal. Well, they do worry about the immediate things, the immediate pleasures and pains and satiations and problems. A predator comes up and they, can flee or they can stand their ground. They look to eat, they look to have sex, they look for these, is it Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Or, yeah, Maslow's? I forget. Anyway, the hierarchy of needs of, shelter, sex, security, food, water, things like that. But it doesn't seem like people like Buddha and Jesus were terribly interested in those things. I mean, look at Gandhi, for God's sakes. He had one, from what I have gathered, I'm sure it's not entirely accurate, he only had 2 possessions or 3 possessions, his begging bowl and his stick and his loincloth. Those things are completely contradictory to what an animal does with its existence. So as we find ourselves moving away from the animal portion of us, that void that we're creating by moving away from our physical selves is being filled with consciousness as we create the void. It could be said that those who put others first are more benevolent, more saintly, more like the bodhisattvas of old. But what are they doing but putting others in front of themselves? They're pushing away that I, me, mine mentality that a dog or a cat might have towards something else. Now, you could look at other hive creatures, ants and bees and whatnot, who do put the hive or the swarm or whatever you want to call it in front of their own well-being, but in the end, the hive and the swarm is their being. It is what they are. They have no personal identity, so it doesn't really stand up. And of course, I welcome any criticism of that anybody might want to post. I don't know who this is for, but it helps to talk it out. If I get to talk it out, I get new ideas. I think of new things. But today is June 8th, I think. It's a Saturday. It's as close as Saturday to June 8th, 2013. Consciousness, yeah. So, but what's the goal of having more consciousness? So, is the goal to make this world a better place? Is that what the goal of it is? Is it to ease the transition from life into death? Is it to have it impact the afterlife, if you believe in an afterlife? Do you get a better seat next to God? Is it easier to transition away? That's all I can think of. It's an easier transition the more consciousness you have. You have to assume that those with higher consciousness would forgive those who killed them. I mean, think of Jesus and Gandhi and Martin Luther King when they were all killed. And you have to imagine they would have all forgiven their murderers if they were, allowed to talk after their own death. But that's besides the point. We could talk about that all day long, but that's besides the point. Shoot, how did I get on that? I lost my train of thought. I apologize. I'm just going to keep pushing ahead. Yeah, so as we move away from our mammal selves, we become more conscious. Oh, yeah. The purpose of consciousness. What's the purpose of it? Maybe there isn't a purpose of it. Maybe there isn't a purpose to it. With these brains that we have, we do look for things like purpose in what we do. There's the saying that, there's a journey to the destination. Well, the journey was the good part. The destination's kind of secondary. Boy, I just butchered that. I'm sure there's a saying that is somewhat close to that, but I didn't nail it right there, that's for sure. But as we move on, and hopefully as our consciousness increases, we all still die. We all still die. And all we can really worry about is this plane of existence, because no one knows what happens after you die. A lot of people think they know or assume they know, but no one really knows. So you have to start with the... Oh, I gotta make a turn real quick. Hold on a second. I gotta make a little turn. I'm not gonna edit this video at all, so I hope you enjoy my turn. So increasing of consciousness has to be something that impacts and improves this world right here. And I think earlier I did describe how those who I assume had higher consciousness... Hold on a second, here we go. Those who I and a lot of folks would assume had higher consciousness did improve the world, or at least tried to. Because that's all we really have is the here and now. So what I'm telling myself right now is we shouldn't really worry about what increasing consciousness will do in the afterlife, but rather how it will benefit this world here. But that brings us to a big question of man's need to benefit by his own understanding. So we attempt to... We think we know a lot that we don't really know. There's cause and effect, and man does not have the gift of understanding things like cause and effect. You think you do one thing, and it's going to do some good, and then it does irreparable harm, but then that harm might do good later on. It's really hard to say. All we can worry about is our own inner space and how we feel about our own actions. There's something that I say is I'll be on the bus, and this is a real world situation here. I'll be on the bus, and the bus will be full, and an old woman will get on. And this actually did happen. And I'll be the only... The bus is full of able-bodied people. They're all my age. They're all between 22 and 35. They're all well-to-do, with their iPods and their iPhones in. Oh, sneeze time. Oh, yeah. They're all well-to-do, able-bodied people, but no one stands up. And I relish the opportunity to stand up, but not for what I would call the right reasons. What I'm hoping for is that all the fertile women on the bus see me as benevolent and a good man and better than the others, and almost better than themselves, to give up my seat when no one else would. And I hope that all the men view me as someone that they hope to be like, and also feel a little bad about themselves. And so she takes the seat. Now, in my opinion, sorry for the snorting, in my opinion, the better person would have stood up simply to give that woman a seat and lighten her load. But in either situation, the end world result is the same. In the end, from an observer from the outside, not assuming anything, you stand, old woman gets seat, the end. But what's going on inside of you is very different. What's going on inside of you is kind of a... For me, it's a bit of a battle. Why am I doing it? And am I doing it for the right reasons? Now, going forward, the day is unaltered, depending on which one I choose for the outside world. The woman still gets her seat. She might go and tell her husband about how someone gave up a seat when she was having a bad day. Who knows? There's no way of knowing. But inside of me, it's very different. Inside of me, I have made the wrong choice or the right choice. It was wrong that I was hoping to instill negative feelings into anybody watching nearby, but it was right that in this plane of existence, the right thing was carried out. Does that matter? I mean, who knows? But something else I've been thinking about, and I'm sure this is all related, but I'm not going to tie it back in, so there's no need to wait for all of that. Something else I've been thinking about is, a while ago, people would smoke because the knowledge of what smoking did to you wasn't completely understood. So you would smoke, and then you would start feeling kind of crappy, and then you would be sick. You would have, throat cancer or lung cancer or what have you. Now it's understood that smoking does cause these things. So who's more to blame? Who's more to blame for their illness? The modern smoker or the past smoker? They didn't have the past smoker didn't have the knowledge that what was hurting them was smoking. They probably suspected, who knows. But having the knowledge is important to, I guess, the judgment of your actions. I was at a casino, and I found myself understanding the psychology, as much as I could, understanding the psychology that the casino uses to get people to spend all their money there. And it's, small rewards and the illusion of the potentiality of winning. But someone else that's there pulling the slot machine arm, which isn't actually a thing anymore, pushing the slot machine button, who thinks they're going to get rich, and they don't understand that they're being manipulated and taken advantage of. They're just having a good time. Who's the real fool here? Because I have the information, but yet I'm still betting on the roulette ball spinning around, and they do not. And they're betting on the roulette ball spinning around. Well, who here is the real fool? It would be me, in my opinion. I'm the real fool because I have the information, yet I choose to continue. Now, that falls apart when I realize that you're paying for a certain amount of fun. You're having a good time, what have you. But still, I'm the bigger fool. So what's going on inside of you is very important. It's very important. So I guess it goes back to man's understanding of cause and effect. Boy, I don't know. I guess I can probably wrap it up here. My destination isn't too far away, so I'll go ahead and let whoever you are go. If you did watch this whole video, I do like replies. You can reply to the things that I say. If anybody even sees this video, I don't know. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And tell me I'm wrong. And specifically tell me exactly why I'm wrong and then correct me. I do look to increase my knowledge of things for sure. Or if you think I'm right, tell me why I'm right. Cite some sources. Give me some things to read. Those things are all very beneficial to me to increase my knowledge and maybe even increase my consciousness. Thank you so much for watching.